Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast. And to close out today's show, we go across the pond and talk about a different kind of football, European football of course, and the state of affairs in the UEFA Champions League. As the league phase comes to a close Tuesday and Wednesday in the final group of games, we take a look at some big teams and some big storylines to look out for come the knockout rounds. I think that all of these teams that I'm going to be talking about are either going to rise to the occasion or crumble. They're all capable of being teams that can make deep runs in this tournament, but also can show signs of their flaws as well. And because of their domestic success, I feel like they're going to be under the most scrutiny in terms of how they perform as well. Whether they're the dark horse that I'm going to talk about or potentially a team to beat. I feel like these four teams are all going to be debated about and discussed in this tournament in the weeks to come. Without further ado, let's go right into the state of affairs in the Champions League, starting off with my potential dark horse in this tournament. This team, in my opinion, is playing some of the best football, not just in the Champions League, but in all of Europe. I really like the look of this side, the shape of this side, what Gianpiero Gasperini is doing, and I'm going to ask the question of you as well. Are they truly the dark horses of this tournament, or can they be regarded as true contenders? I know they're fighting on both fronts in Serie A for their top four positioning, and in the Champions League they currently sit 7th, so right now they're safe, but results could see them drop into the first round in the knockouts, where they're in this group of 16 teams who are fighting for their lives to get into the quarterfinals. But for what we've seen of them, they've had some impressive wins. They had the win over Real Madrid at the early stages of the league phase round, and ultimately they're finding their rhythm with guys like Matteo Retegui, Charles Ketelara creating in the midfield. I really like Ederson defensively, and they've really found stability and a flair that has really gone unsung in this tournament. And I really think that they have the goal-scoring threats to potentially shock some teams, and they play the style of football required to get results in the Champions League. Fast-paced, attacking, free-flowing football that's going to be difficult to defend for some of these top teams in the Champions League. So that's why I'm really liking the look of this Atalanta team. It's not just dark horses, but true Champions League contenders. Let's see if they can qualify in this final league phase game as one of the 8 teams that automatically move on. But ultimately, I think that Atalanta cannot be overlooked anymore. They've continued to stockpile impressive victories and continue to, really look like a team that is primed for Champions League success because of how they play. So that's why I had to ask this question of you. And that's why I had to pronounce them as my quote-unquote dark horses, no matter how good they looked outside of that dark horse pedigree. But let's talk about a team that certainly isn't a dark horse, but may as well be the team to beat here. The team that currently sits atop the league phase standings, undefeated, unblemished up to this point, Liverpool. Are they truly the team to beat in Europe? They're firing on all cylinders. Arne Slot's got them playing an exciting brand of possession-based football that kind of builds on the philosophies of Jurgen Klopp, but really makes them so that Liverpool look a little bit less vulnerable. And now they are looking like not just the best side in the Premier League, where they sit atop the Premier League table, but the best side in all of Europe. They're compact, they're sound, and they have the attacking talent to put up as many goals as they want on you any given day. And yes, you can say that potentially all the talks about their 3 big contract situations that they have to settle, Salah, Van Dijk, and Trent, might come into play here as outside noise sort of breaches this team and gets them a little bit. But they clearly have shown no signs of slowing down this far, and seeing as to how they as well have beaten Real Madrid and other top teams in this tournament thus far. I believe they've beaten PSG as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. But ultimately, I think that Liverpool truly have staked a claim as the team that's looking the best in this tournament so far, and really are a team that many might not want to face come the round of 16 down the line. But ultimately, I think that Arne Slot is going to be the X factor. Can he, as the fixtures get tougher, as they get more congested as a result, as contract situations start to arise and get talked about a little bit more often, how does he handle that storm? And how does it transition to how the players play on the pitch? Because right now, they're playing the best football in the world. But that could change over the coming weeks if, Arne Slot starts to come under a little bit more pressure as a Liverpool manager. But right now, I do believe that statement is true, that they are the team to beat thus far in the Champions League, and I'm excited to see what the knockouts bring for them. Let's talk about a team that was seen as a top contender in the Champions League this year, but are not performing like it, at least in this competition. And it's certainly not appealing to fans like me, considering the fact that the tournament final we played at their home arena, and that is Bayern Munich. And the question is starting to be asked about this team. Are they true contenders? And I know more than anyone what this team is capable of on their day, when every single player in that starting 11 is clicking. It can be the most beautiful football to watch on the continent. But, as we've seen not just in the tournament itself, but in the Bundesliga as well, failure to create chances, failure to convert chances as a result. The wingers constantly stagnating the attack. The ways that Vincent Kompany has to determine the true depth of experience of this roster, the ways that injuries are starting to stockpile now. Alphonso Davies got injured and then lost to Feyenoord. Leon Goretzka got injured in their weekend game in the Bundesliga. Now we might kind of have to see this Bayern roster really step up and certain players adapt new roles they might be comfortable with. Kimmich is already doing that in spades this season, did it last season as well. But when all of these injuries and all these questions start to stockpile, and they're right now sitting 15th in the UEFA Champions League table and have not had an impressive win to date in the Champions League this season, I feel that the question is going to be asked, are they true contenders? Even if somehow, some way they sneak into the top 8, they're going to have a lot of teams lose, and they're going to have to beat Slovan Bratislava, who fortunately is last in the bracket and then in the table. I feel like even if they find a way to sneak into the top 8, or they beat Bratislava but results don't go their way and they're stuck kind of in this league game, they're going to be asked a lot of questions, because there are a lot of teams I feel in the Champions League who now feel they can beat this Bayern team, know their vulnerabilities better than anyone. And there's going to be asked questions of whether or not Bayern can be seen as true contenders in this Champions League. But they control their own destiny. We'll see how the league games shake out, the final ones, and it could determine whether or not Bayern go into the knockouts a little bit more confident because they were able to secure a top 8 spot, or a little bit rattled because the results didn't go their way and they find themselves stuck in the first phase of the knockout rounds. So that's going to be a question to monitor if Bayern start to falter in this competition. And the last question, another contender here that a lot of people are weirded out about in this tournament. They have played very well, second only to Liverpool in the table. They've looked like one of the best teams when it's come to this tournament, at the very least. They started to slip up domestically, though. Are Barcelona, a team that, on their day, become one of the best in Europe under Hansi Flick, getting lucky in the Champions League. And I feel like it's a silly question in many different ways to ask, but I feel like there's many different ways to answer it, because they've had some close calls. Obviously, last week's game against Benfica as an example. But I think this question has more to do with Hansi Flick's style of play rather than any results that occur with this team. What I mean by that is, as someone very familiar with Hansi Flick, it is a very aggressive style of play. And luckily for Barca, at the very least, they have a very deep squad, a very young squad, highly capable of playing this way. But is it going to be effective in the knockout stages of this competition when you really have to start testing the depth of this team? While you have young players who can certainly overcome the rigors of the system, Lamine Yamals of the world, the Gavis, the Pedris of the world, the Jules Koyundes of the world. You have guys like Ilkay Gundogan, Robert Lewandowski, these aging guys really starting to be called into question of how they can lead this team in this system. And so I'm going to be intrigued to see how Barca are affected in the latter stages of this tournament, should they go far, because I know what the best of Hansi Flick's football looks like. It led to a Champions League victory for Bayern in 2020. But I know what the worst can be as well if all of these players don't buy into it and injuries might start to stockpile and older players don't look as well conditioned as younger ones as well. And we're always starting to see it domestically a little bit as they slip up in the La Liga chase. So I feel like even though this question seems silly at the moment, it's going to be a question that's going to be monitored as Barcelona gets tested in the latter stages of the knockout. So I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. But other than that, really, really interesting storylines emerging as we head into the final league phase games that will take place both tomorrow and Wednesday to determine who are the top 8 and who will be fighting for their lives in the first phase of the knockout rounds. But let me know what you think about the Champions League in the comments below. But other than that will just about do it for today's show. Thank you all for tuning in. This has been the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I've been your host, Christopher Shepard. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back here tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As always, like, follow, and subscribe to the show in the network if you haven't done so already. Consider making yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube as always to contribute and interact with the show a little bit more directly. But other than that, I am out for today. I will see you all tomorrow.